The national numbers, as you said, are one thing, but it's the provincial numbers that are the difference. You know, if you look at poll trackers, they're leading Ontario by 10 points. That's huge. There's so many seats in Ontario. In Quebec, they're leading the bloc by 7 or 8 points. In Atlantic Canada, they're 20 points ahead of the Conservatives. So these are the numbers all of the parties are looking at. It's the seat count. Where can we win seats?
Yeah.
So this is the calculus that's going on at the moment, and this goes back to our early conversation about timing and when they want to go.
Yeah. Agree, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, the national numbers, people always pay attention to those, but it is those regional races. If you're O'Toole, you want to get those Ontario numbers up. You're also a little concerned in ours. There had been a three-way tie in BC, and the Conservatives have dropped back a little bit there.
Yeah, that really stood out for me in your poll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the rich regions. That also means, though, you can focus a bit more on regional campaigning. It means if you're Aaron O'Toole and you know you're at 25 now, it helps you design your campaign, right? Where do I have to spend some time early to try and get the numbers up to have a shot here? And again, look, Andrew Scheer almost won the last election, right? So anything can happen. I think Aaron O'Toole is a better candidate. I think it's fair to say the Conservatives are going through a identity, not crisis, but a bit of an identity challenge at the moment, and that's never fun when you're the leader of a party.
Well, I think crisis is good.
No, I don't think it's quite crisis. There's still unity there, but there's frustration, I think, with direction. Yeah, Rob, you're too soft.
We need a new rah. We need a rah speech.
I think saying that there's unity in the Conservative Party at the moment is a little bit of a stretch from my friend Tim.
I didn't say there was a unity. I just said there wasn't a unity crisis.
Okay. All right. No, look, we only have 4 minutes. We only have 4 minutes. I want to. There will be 100 other polls between now and the election. So, what I really want to focus on with the two of you is this race in Ottawa Centre. We had Yasser Naqvi on the program half an hour ago. How do you see this race unfolding now that Catherine McKenna is not running again? I mean, is it Carney? Is it Naqvi for the Liberals? Does it even matter? And the riding goes orange again. How do you see it? Susan Smith. Ottawa Centre.
Ottawa Centre. Well, I live in Ottawa Centre. First of all, Catherine McKenna was an excellent MP, hardworking MP, great for the riding, and she was a great minister, so we will miss her. Yasser was an excellent MPP, great for the riding, and great minister in the provincial government. He would be an excellent candidate. He's well known. Mark Carney, wherever they put him, would be an excellent candidate. There are some ridings perhaps that are suited better to Mark in the Ottawa area than Ottawa Centre.
Is Wimbledon a liberal riding? Is Wimbledon a liberal riding? I saw him in...
Stop from Sportsmith Northwest Territories. He's got his bona fides as a public servant. You know, he's done his time at finance, and before going to be the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of Bank of England, he's a dream candidate.
Dream candidate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You keep telling yourself that. Yeah, okay.
But Ottawa Centre, Yasser is well known. He has a ground game there. Yeah. The party can decide where the Prime Minister has the power to nominate people and make have whether or not they have a nomination race or not. It's still just a week since Catherine announced she was not running again. So I think they're figuring that out. But the addition of those two very capable individuals to the Liberal caucus at the end of this campaign will be most welcome.
Okay. What do you think? How do you see that going, that riding, Tim?
I also live here. I think it really is a riding that is focused on. I think it'll either go Liberal or NDP. I think Susan's right. Yasser is viewed as a hardworking person and has done good stuff for this riding. I think Catherine's success in this riding was she demonstrated that all politics is local and focused on getting a lot of local things done. But so did Paul Dewar when he was here, and so did Ed Broadbent. I think this riding a person who represents it well, who has a position either in government or is a senior player in opposition, and is a good ambassador for the riding. So if the NDP find a good candidate who fits some of that profile, along with the ground organization that Joel Harden, who defeated Nasser, has, they could win this riding too. I don't think it's going to be easy by any stretch, but it's going to depend on the candidate and whether the public in this riding believes they give a damn about the riding first.
Okay. Hey, great to hear from both of you. Thanks again. Continued good health.
And to you too.
You too, Rob. I just never want to see you in Wimbledon whites. Promise.
No fear of that. Okay? No fear of that. Okay, thank you again.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Consumer Strategies, Tim Powers from Blue Sky Strategies. That is Susan Smith, and that is your political fix. Wasn't that great? We'll continue the political conversation coming up after the news. I want to take a long, hard, soul-searching, arduous look at the Conservative Party of Canada.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local leaders, updates on the latest health news, local business presenting their new offerings, and how our local communities are working their way through these unprecedented times. Visit and subscribe to Rogers TV on YouTube for the latest local information.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
On va commencer la réunion dans une minute. Merci. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue au Conseil municipal pour la ville d'Ottawa pour le 7 juillet.
Welcome to City Council on July 7, 2021. By electronic
participation. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. And we think of two great leaders in our community that recently passed away. Rabbi Bolka, such a great spiritual leader for so many people in our community, and Barb McInnes, the founder of the Ottawa Committee Foundation, and the tremendous work Barb has done in so many different fields across the city. Our sympathies are with their family and friends, and please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Merci. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Dudas.
PC.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Suds.
Here.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Présent.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Egelad.
Sorry, here.
Councillor Deans. Councillor Tierney.
Présent.
Councillor Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard. Councillor Cucci.
Hello.
Councillor Kidd. Here. Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan.
I'm here.
Councillor Watson. And Councillor Hubley.
You see?
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Deputy Clerk, there was a correction to the minutes on Councillor Shirelli's dissent on item 14. With the will of council, his microphone apparently could not be turned on, as I understand.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Shirelli advised us after item 14 from June 23rd, 2021 council regarding zero-emission buses for Transpo that due to an issue with his microphone, he was unable to register his dissent. So we're asking that this, with the will of council, could be registered in minutes from June 23rd.
Carried.
Carried. Conference 21, adoption de procès verbaux pour le 23 juin 2021. Adopté.
Carried.
Declaration of interest, déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. See none, communications as presented. No regrets filed date. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît. Appuyé par conseiller Kavanagh.
Monsieur le maire, je me demande si c'est possible de le mettre à l'écran.
We have it on screen, please.
Councillor, do you have a copy of it?
Report 23, Standing Committee, Environment Protection, Water and Wastewater, Report 17, Planning Committee, Report 45, and a report from the City Clerk entitled Summary of Oral and Written Public Submission for Items Subject to the Planning Act Explanation Requirements at the City Council meeting of June 23rd be received and considered, and that the rules and procedure be suspended to receive and consider Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 27 and Transportation Committee Report 20 due to the time sensitivity of the item contained in these reports.
Carried. Adopted.
Carried. Carried.
Committee reports, rapport des comités Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 23, 200 Russ Bradley Road. Carried.
Carried.
Amendments to permit on-farm diversified uses and agriculture-related uses in rural and agricultural zones of the City of Ottawa. Carried. Bylaw 2008-250 Omnibus Amendments Q2 2021.
Could we hold that, Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Item 4, zoning bylaw amendment, general zoning provisions, parking and secondary dwelling units. There's a motion by Councillor Gower and Leeper, I believe, that delays this. If I'm not mistaken, Councillor Gower, would you like to introduce it?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a motion to delay one part of the report of secondary dwelling units. So whereas the report, among other things, proposed changes to section 133 of the zoning bylaw respecting secondary dwelling units, including new limits on maximum floor area and the number of bedrooms within a secondary dwelling unit, and whereas significant concerns have been expressed with these elements of the proposed new section 133 and the impacts that these may have on the viability of secondary dwelling units. And whereas in light of these concerns, additional time is required for council to make an informed decision on appropriate standards for size restrictions for secondary dwelling units. Therefore, be it resolved that the proposed provisions for section 133 respecting secondary dwelling units, document 1, details of recommended zoning of the report, be removed from the report, and that staff bring a separate report on this matter for consideration at a future meeting of Planning Committee and Council. And therefore be it resolved that the related bylaw in the motion to introduce bylaws for this meeting of council be replaced with a revised bylaw entitled A Bylaw of the City of Ottawa to amend bylaw number 2008-250 to implement zoning changes related to parking and other zoning provisions to clarify their intent and remove redundancies, which omits the above described secondary dwelling unit provision amendments, and therefore be it further resolved no further notice with respect to the amendments described in the report as amended pursuant to subsection 3417 of the Planning Act.
So I think this has the support of staff. So on the Gower-Leeper amendment, carried?
Carried.
On the report as amended. Okay. Item 5, zoning bylaw amendment, rural properties affected by the OP Amendment 180. Carried?
Carried.
And Committee on the Environment and Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management. Item 6, Solid Waste Management Plan, Phase 2. Carried?
Carried.
Item 7, Solid Waste Residential Curbside Collection. Carried?
Carried.
FEDCO, report 27, rapport numéro 27 de Comité des finances et de développement économique, Hickory Street remediation. Carried?
Carried.
Item 9, launch of the Better Homes Loans Program to residential retrofit programs. Carried?
Carried.
Planning Committee report number 45, rapport numéro 45 de Comité de l'urbanisme, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment 2 Montreal Road and 3 Selkirk Street.
Carried.
Carried. Item 11, zoning bylaw amendment 216 Murray Street, modification du règlement de zonage de 1-6 rue Murray. Carried. Zoning bylaw amendment 20 Mountain Crescent, modification du règlement de zonage 20 Croissant Mountain. Carried. Transportation Committee report number 20, rapport numéro 20 de Comité des Transports, motion, economic support for the service sector, tourist information, kiosk fees. Carried. Thank you, Councillor Tierney, for bringing that idea forward. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? No. On the bulk consent agenda as presented?
Carried.
Go back to the item that was held. I believe Councillor McKenney would like item number 3, omnibus amendments held.
Yes, that is.
Sorry, Councillor McKenney, just before you jump in, can I just get just on a point of order, just a question to staff? The recommendation in front of us is different from what we voted on at committee. And in fact, the reference to the referral motion is also not accurate to what we dealt with at committee. So can I just get staff to clarify recommendation 4 in the report before council?
The deputy clerk has a comment.
Mr. Mayor, I will let planning staff weigh in on their interpretation, but the matter that was referred to council was without recommendation from the planning committee. And when a matter is referred to council without a recommendation, what is before council is that council consider the matter. In this instance, that recommendation for would merely be received unless a member of council moved and seconded it to put it on the floor for approval. So if the recommendations from planning committee and AIRAC carry as presented, recommendation 4 would not be adopted, and therefore that portion of the report would not be removed.
Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, and thank you for that explanation. And also to Councillor Moffat for convening a meeting of the affected communities who could potentially be affected by any downstream effects from the earlier approval by the Rio Valley Conservation Authority to cut and fill this area. I just wanted to, one of the things that was evident in the meeting, and I know RVCA spoke to it, but I just want to hear from our staff going forward. You know, there's a concern that's been raised that that communities that could easily be affected, riparian property owners who could be affected by a change in the floodplain had not been notified of the decision by RVCA and even our decision around OPA 212. And I'd like to hear from staff, what is our responsibility as council, as city, to ensure that all communities and all potentially affected homeowners and communities are consulted and engaged in any of these types of changes to floodplains.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. So certainly in terms of Plan 12, there was notification in accordance with the Planning Act and council notification procedures. It was fairly well publicized at the time. There was a lot of discussion. Committee and council members will likely recall. In terms of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority process, we obviously cannot dictate their process and how they do notification, whether they do notification in the case like this. We have committed as a follow-up to that meeting to share the concerns that were raised by committee members and request that they consider providing notifications when they issue their permits in the future. But again, I will caution it is their process and their mandate under provincial law.
Now, I can appreciate that. However, I'm not sure that just falling back on OPA 212 is enough. I mean, if we want to be open and transparent with residents, I know as a councillor and you know, many of my colleagues did not know what the furthest outcome of OPA 212 would be. And I continue to argue that it did not in any way indicate that there would be a cut and fill of a floodplain. So again, it concerns me that we're going to continue to go forward without a lesson learned in terms of our responsibility around consulting affected neighbors. So I'll leave it at that. I think we're agreeing to disagree at this point, but I really do hope that that we come up with a solution that will give property owners everywhere, especially those near floodplains, some assurance that we will properly consult with them moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Catherine, for raising this. And I concur with Catherine that while Mr. Herwire says that all the full notifications were given, something slipped through the cracks here on a very, very serious issue. So I have a direction to staff today that I would like to submit, and I believe that staff are going to take this direction. Would I be correct, Mr. Herwire? Read it in.
Share with us, Councillor. Do you have it?
Yeah.
So we can put on the screen.
Oh, I haven't sent it to Caitlin. I was told I didn't have to, but I'll do it. Do you want me to read it and I'll send it right to Caitlin? It's very short.
Yeah, sure. Just read it would be good.
Okay. So this stems from the consultation that staff and the councillors, Councillor McKenney and myself had on Friday. Residents of Heart's Desire who feel that they were not fully notified of this cut and fill, the application by Rideau Valley. And I want to thank Councillor Moffat for facilitating this meeting so that we could answer some of the residents' concerns. So this is my direction to staff. So that when Planning, Infrastructure, Economic Development receives an application to alter a floodplain, that city staff request that the relevant conservation authority reach out to residents and communities that could potentially be affected, and that the conservation authority provide confirmation that and the city staff notify the area. If the staff do this, then I think that we might fill in some of the gaps that are now currently exist in this OPA legislation. Okay.
Great, thank you.
And I will send that now to Caitlin. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So the direction is to staff, and staff noted that. Please.
Thank you, and thank you again to as well to Councillor for participating in the meeting last week. I just two things. Well, maybe they're related. So, just considering the RBCA is here and they don't have a representative here, they can't speak to the items that come to council. They do have to follow their legislative guidelines when it comes to permitting and direction. And this would be a bit of a challenge with the direction. We'd be asking the RBCA to do something that they're not permitted to do. It's no different than if someone applies for a building permit at the city. There is no notification required, and the permit itself is a private matter between the city and the individual applying for the permit. It's the same with the floodplain map. And so one of the things that we've done, this is what we discussed at our meeting last week, and Summer Casgrain-Robertson, the executive director of the RBCA, was amental to this and understanding of the situation that not all floodplain alteration permits are necessarily the same. And some are obviously more impactful than others, but they all have to be treated the same. So at the city, we've kind of gotten around that by creating other processes and policies that we're permitted to do, such as site plan control, where zoning is already in place. So Summer was amenable to speaking to the ministry to talk about that, because right now they don't have the ability to notify or consult when a permit is applied for. And that's kind of the crux of the situation here. And that's where Heart's Desire was upset by, is that they didn't get notified, but ultimately the RBCA does not have the ability to notify, and they aren't allowed to based on the legislation. So that's something that could be corrected or needs to be corrected, but it's really between the Conservation Authority through the Conservation Authorities Act. So it's something that it's a discussion. I mean, certainly the direction, it can be accepted by staff, but it's something that does have to go through the RBCA and some discussions with the ministry, which I know in that meeting they were, obviously accepting of that challenge and wanting to try to address that concern. So I think it's fair. I mean, there's no question that this floodplain alteration is much more significant than just a simple cut and fill on the back 40. It's a little bit different than that. So, is there a potential for the act and for the RBC to have different parameters in order to manage that? I think there is, but it will require a bit more effort on behalf of the ministry and the CAs themselves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Conseil-Fleury.
Yes, Mr. Matt, my questions don't relate to the floodplain, so I can go. I don't know if Councillor El Chantiria related to. I'm glad to go back on. Relates to 200 Lee's segment.
You still on this item, Councillor?
On this item, correct.
Yeah, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question. I tried to resolve it, and I'm sorry, it's probably because of COVID and the distance. I'm trying to get clarification. We've been appealed in the past for the Lee's TOD, and I see that in the omnibus, there is a property within the TOD, 200 Lee's, that is now part of it. So I don't know if we can get context and if there are impacts to the Lee's TOD, which is a concern to our community.
Sure, I'm happy to take that question through you, Mr. Mayor. So this item came about because an application was received by planning staff on 200 Lee's. Staff took a closer look at the zoning, and it was determined that there was no applicable height limit in the zoning bylaw for the property. And that's very unusual and was very likely done in error. So even though the properties were rezoned and subject to the OPA in 2014 for TOD, the height limit was never actually. So that was a mistake in the exception. So what staff tried to do was just correct the exception by adding a height limit that mirrored the height limit that was applied through the TOD in the secondary plan, which is 30 stories. So staff applied a 100-meter height limit kind of based on the mixed-use zone. And then after, just before planning committee, we had some discussions with the community association, and the community association disagreed with the 100-meter limit for 30 stories. So we've decided that there was a motion to defer so that we could take a closer look at the conversion from stories to height for that property, recognizing that there is not a citywide strategy for the conversion from stories to height, but there are some other properties in the immediate area with a kind of different formula applied to it. So we've decided to defer this matter and take a closer look with the community association at the appropriate height limit, but noting that the 30 meters from the TOD is the height limit that we're looking at implementing. It was missed in the zoning bylaw.
No, and I appreciate the clarification. The TOD is actually in between Sandy Hill and Old Ottawa South. I believe Old Ottawa South is interested and engaged for the specific application at 200 Lee's. But there are applications at 2 Robinson. There are other applications that are within the TOD of Lee's. And I'd like to understand if today's omnibus has impacts of that or the anomaly that was found, if it does have other implications on the TOD.
Anything else, Councillor?
Well, I'd like clarity for that, Mr. Mayor. If not, I'd like the item, that's segment deferred, because I've not been engaged in at least TOD does have the majority of its area or split area between Councillor Manav and I.
So staff response?
Mr. Mayor, I can respond. With respect to 2 Robinson and Councillor Fleury's question, there are active applications in there now for rezoning for a development on the proposal. So staff will be looking at the heights that are appropriate for that. We'll be going through the process there. So I'm not certain whether the zoning is identical to the one referred at 200 Lee's, and there's to be a meeting set up shortly. JC Renault actually will be setting up that meeting with staff and with the community association. But through the rezoning process at 2 Robinson, we'll put a height limit or make sure there's an appropriate height limit on that property through that development.
Okay, so can I just get clarification? I appreciate your comment relating to a particular application. My interest in my intervention today relates to the bigger TOD zone for Lee's. I was not able to get staff clarification ahead of council meeting, and that's the reason of my intervention today. Have we discovered an anomaly in the Lee's TOD that should be addressed holistically, or is 200 Lee's a unique component of of the Lee's TOD. Sorry, I'm not able to get clarity on that piece.
Mr. Mayor, may I just intervene for a second? This is an exceptional situation. It's probably one of the only parcels in the center of the city that has no height limit on it because of the error in the prior zoning bylaws. The staff recommend plugging a hole and putting a height limit on it. If the councillor is not comfortable with this, we'll work with the councillor on a deferral motion for this item. We'll bring it forward in a separate item at another point in time. But right now, there is no height limit on that, which means an application could come in today with no protection as to what that height limit would be. So it's a concern that this remains unresolved.
Yeah, I've been involved in the Lee's TOD. There's a lot of history there, Mr. Mayor, with the university and public partners. I'd like the item deferred so that both of our communities, Councillor Menard and I, could meaningfully engage, because unfortunately we've been appealed on the TOD. If staff feel like we need a cap today to protect ourselves, I'm not opposed to it, but I want more comprehensive engagement. So, Mr. Willis, are you recommending deferral if that's how I feel?
Mr. Mayor, may I recommend that we take the questions on the other matters, and then if with your council's consent, we give staff a few minutes to work with legal and clerks to get a deferral motion for this item, because I accept the councillor's comment that this maybe let's take this one offline. We just procedurally need a moment to figure out what that motion looks like. So I'll ask Mr. Mark to assist us to get a deferral motion for that one item.
But I think, I don't make it very clear. It's just for that one item. We're not going to defer the whole package.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. That's my recommendation, is that Mr. Mark assist us to get the deferral for one item.
Okay, so we'll go offline with that and consult Councillor Fleury, and we'll carry on. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go back to the original direction from Councillor Meehan, because A, it was not on the screen. B, I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. Creating policy on the fly, it always concerns me. As a councillor who represents a large ward with the cut and fill policy apply, or double what we call two-zone policy, I'm concerned about what we are directing here. Are we directing outside agency, or are we directing our staff? I'm not clear in that direction. Do we have the authority, and I'm looking for legal, do we have the authority to direct all of the conservation authority within the city limit, whether Rideau, Mississippi Valley, or South Nation? That's my first question.
Mr. Mayor, it's Tim Mark speaking. We do not have the authority to direct the Conservation Authority to provide notice. As I understand the direction, though, it is a request to the Conservation Authorities. It does not purport to be directed to them.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mark. That's why we love you so much. Clear as anything. Thank you. I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Meehan, you've spoken on this item. Is it a point of information?
I just wanted to see where we were on it, because we had gone off the topic. So it's just a request. It's not a new policy. It's just a request. So just thank you, Mr. Mark, for clarifying that. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh, on the item 3.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate my colleagues raising this. Floodplain is a big issue, and is becoming a bigger issue with climate change, and it's something we've all experienced. Both Councillor El-Shantiri and I certainly have, and we take it very seriously. So notification to residents is extremely important. Anyone living in that area. So is there any way to take this back and to make sure that that direction is given?
So your question is to who?
Well, I guess procedurally, can we have that, or to staff? Is it possible to take this back and so that it can be fixed, or can it be fixed here so that that direction be given?
So you're talking.
I'll ask the mover. I'll ask. This is maybe I should ask
folks. Sorry. On that. Excuse me. Councillor Kavanaugh, are you talking about the direction Councillor Meehan has brought forward?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got an answer from Mr. Mark on that. We can't direct them, but this is asking them to do
Yes.
proper notification. I think Councillor Meehan, is that correct, the intent?
Yeah.
Okay,
So is that okay then? Is that?
We right to ask an outside body. We just can't direct or tell them to do what we'd like them to do. But I think us asking, and we have representatives and we pay into the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, we should have some clout around the table to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay. Is the mover satisfied? Is that a friendly? Is that okay? Great. All right. Thank you then.
Okay. So we're waiting. What I would suggest we do is that we pass item 3, the omnibus amendments, minus that one section of Councillor Fleury's, and we'll. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Mr. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 200 lease is actually already deferred, or recommended by Planning Committee to be deferred. It's recommendation 2 in the report. So with the report to come, the general manager's concerns I would offer are completely valid. That we need to get a height limit in place as soon as possible. Recommendation 2 provides that this item is to come back to committee on August the 26th. So the deferral of this item is already called for by the report, Mr. Mayor.
Wow, you're good, Mr. Mark. There we go. All we had to do was read that. So thank you. Okay, so that satisfies, I think, Councillor Fleury and Councillor Meehan and McKenney.
Sorry, I'd like to know how to dissent on the Jockville overlay.
Yeah, just tell me right now you're dissenting on that.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Deans, sorry, Councillor Meehan dissenting. Councillor Deans.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to follow up on the issue that Councillor Fleury raised and Mr. Willis and Mr. Mark were speaking about, and this little gap where there's no height limit on this particular property. And Mr. Willis raised the issue of potential for applications to come in before this issue is resolved. And I'm just wondering if it would be prudent of council to implement an interim control bylaw until this issue is resolved.
Mr. Willis.
Mr. Mayor, the item 2 of the recommendation, and I apologize to council that I did not see item 2 when I provided my prior response, so I apologize to council, does have us coming back on August 26th. And given that this is a very short time frame, and I'm reticent to use an interim control bylaw necessarily, since it does preclude us from using it for other purposes at a later point in time, I recommend that we just proceed as is indicated in the report before council and take item 2 as adopted by committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So item 3, dissent by Councillors McKenney and Meehan.
And Menard.
Carried.
Leaper.
And Leaper.
Dissent.
And Kavanaugh.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just clarifying the dissent from councillors.
Just on the floodplain study, correct, Councillor McKenney?
McKenney, Meehan, Leaper, Kavanaugh,
right.
Menard, and Meehan.
Correct.
And Deans.
Okay, carried. With those dissents noted.
Yeah.
The next item is motion to adopt reports. Motion d'adoption de rapport. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît. Seconded by Councillor Kavanaugh.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Je m'assure de bien la section, je crois que c'est...
Sorry, this is motion to adopt reports.
Monsieur le Maire, merci.
Can you hear me, Councillor?
Je crois que c'est la section ici que le règlement est à l'ordre du jour.
The translation is going into the main channel as opposed to a translation channel.
Yeah.
So, Madam Deputy Clerk, if we can look into that.
We will ask technical staff to assist in ensuring that the floor sound is going into the main channel in the Zoom meeting.
Okay. Can we try it now, Councillor Fleury?
Donc, Monsieur le Maire, je pense que je lis la section que le rapport numéro 23 du
Just mute the ENG account. Then you'll solve the problem.
Allez-y, Conseiller Fleury.
Parfait. Que le règlement numéré à l'ordre du jour sous le titre motion portant présentation des règlements 3 lectures.
Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 23.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of council meeting of July 7, 2021.
Juste les rapports sont...
Clarification. Reports were being received and adopted as amended.
Motions of which notice has been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. Moved by Councillor Fleury, seconded by myself. Councillor Fleury, if you want to introduce the motion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I introduced it as last council meeting. It relates to completion of our renovations of Arts Court and the expansion of the Ottawa Art Gallery. It relates to exterior signage. So we had to, I don't know if the clerk's able to put the motion on the screen, but we have to waive the bylaw component to complete the exterior signage at Arts Court. There are 3 areas.
Questions or comments? The motion is presented, and the Arts Court, I believe, pays for the sign, Councillor. This is just allowing it to go up.
Correct. This is city staff. This is to complete the project, and it is funded within the accounts for the renos.
The motion. Carried. Next motion or motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Myself, seconded by Councillor Leeper, the commemorative naming and the bridge rehabilitation for federal government on suspension of the rules. Carried. Colleagues, I'd like to offer a few words. A really exciting project that will see the Prince of Wales Bridge renamed and rehabilitated over the coming year. As you know, we started planning in December to convert the bridge into an active transportation corridor for walking, cycling, and cross-country skiing. A lot of work has been done in the background by our staff in advance of this project, as was detailed in Karina Duclos' memo that was circulated on Monday, along with Councillor Leeper and our motion that's before you today. I want to thank Karina, Isabelle, Jasmine, and their teams for all of the hard work they've done on this project for several months. Merci à vous pour votre travail.
Thank you so much for your hard work on this project. This will be very good for our community.
Required to complete the revitalization, and we're hoping for an announcement in the coming weeks. I do want to particularly thank the Honourable Catherine McKenna, the Minister of Infrastructure and the Member of Parliament for Ottawa Centre, who has been a champion of this project for many, many months. Our motion today will confirm the city's required contribution to this project using transit reserves, which would have been paid for the necessary pier work in future years. In other words, this work had to be done whether we are converting the bridge to an active transportation pathway or not because of erosion and so on, as well as DCs collected for the active transportation network and specifically for this multi-use pathway. During my State of the City address in January, I proposed to rename this asset as the Chief William Commenda Bridge to honor an admired Algonquin leader and a bridge builder who was Chief of Kitigan-Zibi from 1951 to 1970. Prior to that announcement, I had sought and received the support of our region's Algonquin leaders, including former Grand Chief Polson, Chief Dylan White Duck, Chief Wendy Jocko, as well as Claudette Commanda, Chief Commanda's granddaughter, who we all know very well.
Every leaders and the family Commanda is supporting this motion.
Elected Grand Chief of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe National Tribal Council, Mr. John Boudrias, who is both president of Kitigan-Zibi and also in Nepean. And I actually saw the Grand Chief the other day. He is a big Montreal Canadiens fan, and he was being interviewed with his Habs jersey on, very proud of how well the team is doing. We had a good discussion the city has been doing with our Algonquin partners to make sure their communities will be able to benefit from this project that crosses the Kitchissippi, the Algonquin name for the Secret River, and Grand Chief Boudreaux was very supportive of our approach. In June, the city's commemorative public consultation also highlighted an overwhelming support for the renaming. As a result, our motion today, if passed by will confirm that this will henceforth be known as the Chief William Command Bridge. In addition, our city funding, the motion will % of the construction budget, or $9,000, to Algonquin Public Art, as well as include economic opportunities in the first for the City of Ottawa, mandating that pre-qualified companies reach out to Algonquin contractors and seek out Algonquin labor for the project. I'm proud that we're setting an example for Indigenous consultation and engagement as part of this project. The motion reflects that engagement, and it aligns with the city's reconciliation effort. I hope Councillor Leeper and I can count on your support for this very exciting initiative. Councillor Leeper, as the seconder, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Mayor. And this is a very exciting project. Mayor, I'd like to thank you and your office in particular. For several years, I have frequently been in touch with your staff to ensure that this was a priority in your office, and have frequently been assured that it is. And I'm very pleased that I've been able to bring this over the line. I also absolutely want to thank Minister McKenna, for whom this was a priority as well. And thank you very much for the work that you've done to ensure that our Indigenous partners in the region are so tightly linked into this project as well. This is simply going to be a huge tourism draw in Ottawa. It will be a 4-season gem recreationally in the city, and it's also going to be a really key part of our transportation network for active transportation, bringing people safely back and forth to Gatineau. I want to emphasize as well that Dave Adams, Groomer Dave, who I'm sure many of you know, has committed to grooming this bridge. So for those of your residents who are currently enjoying the winter trail, this is going to be very exciting as well, bringing people in Ottawa tantalizingly close to Gatineau Park in a safe and segregated way. I do hope, colleagues, that you're able to support this. It has been many years in the making, and I know that all residents of Ottawa are looking forward to seeing a safe connection across the river that is going to be so very beautiful. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Conseil. Thank you for your support. And Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I do agree. I think this is a really exciting project, and I welcome the renaming of the bridge. I think that at this particular time, it's exactly the right the name for the Prince of Wales Bridge. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the cost of this project. At $22 million, it's more than double what we had originally budgeted for. Is there, I guess I will ask that, is cost an issue for anyone right now for a transitional, because we wanted to have as part of our light rail system, but this is a transitional use for this pathway. Is this with money now?
Well, I'll ask Mr. Willis, I think, to comment on it, and Karina is also available for specific questions. On the issue, it's always a challenge when we say the price is doubled. It was based on original estimates a couple of years ago, and estimates are different categories, and as they get closer to the tender process, you get a more precise dollar figure. Mr. Willis?
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Duclos can assist me in a minute, but the original budget was primarily based on some modifications to the bridge structure and primarily pure reconstruction work. With all of the work we've done and additional information we have on bridge safety measures, which is a very significant issue in this instance, additional measures than what was only contemplated in earlier cost estimates, which is very appropriate under the circumstance. And when we talk about whether it's worth it from a safety perspective, but it's also significantly worth it from an economic development and tourism perspective, because this will become one of Ottawa's biggest attractions when it's built. So I believe, Mr. Mayor, this is a very, very good investment for the community. I think Councillor Leeper talked quite eloquently about how long this has been a desire for us to turn this into an active transportation facility. And I think the cost estimates are reasonable and consistent with other city projects.
So will the money that we're investing now, it's an investment that when we want to incorporate light rail network.
Excuse me, clearly, so if you could answer that question.
I'm just asking that we are going to spend now structurally and on the improvements on the bridge. This is not going to be money that we're going to have to reinvest later when we want to incorporate it into our light rail structure. You're saying money that must be now to that we envision multi-pathway.
Mr. Mayor, there are two elements of Ms. Duke can assist me. One is on the piers and supports whatever the future is, so that bridge is an asset to continue to invest in the pier structures. On the excuse me, the other part of the budget is for the active transportation component, and we do expect that will get used for many, many years. So it is money spent. We expect high usage at such time, and I defer to Mr. or Mr. Scrimger or others who might be able to assist them to talk about what the future is. It's not in plans to convert this bridge to rail, and this is the multi-use pathway is the priority for the next number of years. So this is money, as I said, well invested.
Can you tell me where the Indigenous art will be located? Is it on the bridge? Is it coming up to the bridge? Where would that be?
I'll ask Ms. Duclos if she has the answer to that question, and if not, we'll get that for you, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor, for the question. We don't have a delegation for the art. We have allocated the budget for the art, and we will work with our Rec and Culture group to move ahead with what we're going to make related to that. So we don't have the piece of art defined in either location.
Okay, well, I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm thrilled with this project. As somebody who has been hiking under it for over 25 years, close to 30, it's something I've always felt frustrated about, that was there and we couldn't use it. It was crying to be used, and I really appreciate hearing the news about used in the winter for cross-country skiing, which will add to the networks we already have, not just with Premier Dave's network, but also further up with Britannia Trails. So hopefully we can talk the NCC to connecting everything so we can go right through to Gatineau Park. But this is good news. It's very good for our neighbors across the way in Gatineau as a transportation link to Ottawa. So I think it's extremely helpful on that end as well. Thanks to everyone who contributed to this, to the minister, to Mayor and Councillor Leeper and staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Question to staff to start off. When the City of Ottawa purchased this bridge, did the federal government give up any responsibility for maintaining it? It was always my understanding that a bridge that connects two provinces is a federal bridge, federal responsibility. But when the City of Ottawa purchased it and acquired it, is the federal government free and clear of any financial contribution going forward?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure who's the best to answer that question. I'll take a shot at it, and if Mr. Manconi or Mr. White has information to correct me if I'm wrong about it. The bridge is property of the City of Ottawa, so responsibility. The federal government uses its regulatory role to ensure that the owners and investors in bridges, whether they be normally their railways or provincial transportation authorities, are responsible for maintaining them. They use a regulatory authority. I don't believe there's a funding mechanism for that. Otherwise, we would certainly have been looking for that.
Okay.
And I think my understanding, Councillor, and Mr. Will is correct, but the city bought it from a private railway. It wasn't a federal bridge. It was one of the railways.
Okay. Mayor's correct.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just, any additional contributions to the $22 million bill is certainly appreciated. City of Gatineau will be benefiting from this bridge equally like City of Ottawa residents. Was the City of Gatineau ever approached to contribute towards the $22 million bill?
I can comment on that because I had discussions with the mayor. It's the bridge, even though part of it goes and lands on Quebec soil, it is 100% Ottawa's responsibility. They're obviously supportive of the bridge because it's a good linkage for their residents as well. But to comment on your other point with respect to federal funding, we feel very confident that we'll have an announcement very shortly on federal funding to support that project.
Excellent. My final question is the contribution of transit reserves to this cost. What is the current total balance of the transit reserves account?
Sorry, Councillor. I apologize. Who your comment to?
Well, the treasurer or the GM of OC Transpo.
I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't have that number for you today, Councillor, but I can certainly get it to you. I can tell you it's definitely on the positive side and a review was done, and this is affordable.
So can you confirm we're not draining the entire account? This is a fraction of?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for those answers. I'm certainly supportive of this recommendation. I think the local councillors have articulated well why this is great, not just for the immediate community, but the city of Ottawa. We certainly need to do these types of projects that connect and provide active transportation. The naming of the bridge, I highly support as well. I think this is highly appropriate, and I support both components of this motion. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. So on the motion, carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Dissent by
Councillor Meehan.
Councillor Meehan, okay. Next is Councillor Cloutier has a motion that requires suspension of the rules, seconded by Councillor Meehan. It's a timing issue with the Auditor General's interim report. On suspension of the rules, carried?
Carried.
Councillor Cloutier, I'd like to introduce your motion, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you very much. And the motion was circulated with the procedural memo, along with a memo from our new Auditor General, Madame Goujon. And basically, the whereas is the Auditor General would like to bring a change to the audit work plan for 2022. And again, she has sent a comprehensive memo to members of council. I hope you'll support it. And it deals with the recent approval from council to move forward with a significant investment to purchase e-buses and the move to entering into an agreement with the infrastructure bank. The project has a certain amount of risk that might benefit from the attention of the Auditor General's office. And so she has proposed to management that she include an audit to review the risks of the projects as they arise, as opposed to after the facts. It might include a review of the contracts prior to signing to identify major gaps, risks, and the fit of e-buses for its stated purpose. I understand the Auditor General has discussed this, certainly with me as chair of the audit committee, and with management of the city, who are receptive to this strategy. And so due to the time sensitivity of this contract to be embedded in the process, if I could put it that way, I am asking for support of council to pass the motion. And I guess I should read the whereas of the motion, not the whereas, the therefore. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council approve the amendment to the Office of the Auditor General's 2021 interim audit work plan to include an audit of zero-emission buses. Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci, Conseiller. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cloutier. I guess I have a couple of practical questions. So if I understand from the motion and reviewing the memo from the Auditor General, that her office is going to be working in lockstep with Mr. Canalakis' office. Councillor Cloutier has indicated, for example, reviewing the contracts before the contracts are signed. So if I understand correctly, that means that we will have input from the auditor's office before Mr. Kanak, Mr. Manconi make decisions, before those contracts are signed. So my question is, and I hope this doesn't happen, but my question is, after we do all of this, if problems arise, and which is normally when the auditor's office would be involved, the auditor's already given a recommendation which has been followed by city staff. So to me, and I look for direction here, but to me, the auditor has boxed herself out of doing an audit after the fact, because her advice, her information, input would be implicated in the decision that was made, which has now turned out in the future to be not the best decision we could have made. So I don't know who that's directed to, either Mr. Kanellakis or to the AG.
Yeah, the Auditor General's on the line, and it's a very good point, and she has a very good answer to that point, because I raised it as well when we had a meeting earlier this week.
As did I with the AG, so it's an excellent question.
Our Auditor General is on the screen, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor, it is a very good question. Essentially, the distinction is looking at what a consulting engagement is versus an audit engagement. And so it's ensuring that we have proper parameters in place to not breach our independence. So first and foremost, we will not manage. Our client is committee and council. So we will be establishing key criteria that we will be auditing against. We have yet to determine what the scope of our audit will be. It might very well be only a small part of this particular project. So we will report against a criteria and we will give conclusions to that effect. Our conclusions will not be related to a go, no go decision with regards to the project. It will be likely, again, as I mentioned, with regards to a very small aspect. It does not preclude us from auditing online. If we were advising, we were able to audit obviously that type of device. So that's really the clear distinction with regards to how we are auditing. My hopes is that our report will come at a similar timing prior to information to make your decision. It is not a key decision-making tool. And so I think that's one of the key aspects that we have to highlight, which ensures our independence is maintained.
Thank you for that. I'm still a bit confused. If you're not advising Mr. Kanellakis and you're not advising council, I'm not sure what you're doing. I think you are implicated in the decision-making process. And so again, I still fundamentally think there's an issue if an audit needs to be done down the road by your office. And I'll just leave it at that. I guess we'll agree to disagree. I don't question your expertise or your interest and engagement in the project, but if what you're providing isn't going to be utilized in any way to make the decision, I'm not sure what it is that you're providing.
Perhaps maybe I could clarify my response. So we are not advising management. If we were advising management, that's where we'd have a conflict of interest. We'd be doing more of a consulting engagement than an audit. In our case, audits are always a hope that is a tool for council and committee to either have a lessons learned for future. In this case, my hope is that it will help inform a decision at the end of the day. Similar to prior meetings with regards to the Integrity Commissioner's report that comes forward, we bring forward recommendations and it's up to committee and council to determine how they'd like to utilize those recommendations.
So if I can just sum up, if I understand, you're not advising the bureaucratic side of the city, but in effect, you're advising council.
That is correct.
Okay, so you can still audit work done by Mr. Manconi and his group or city manager's office is what you're saying.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I'd like Councillor Gower, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a very quick comment. I really welcome this role for the Auditor General's office. I think we have an excellent resource in the Office of the Auditor General, and I'm very pleased to see a more proactive role early in the process. It's I know in the private sector, an evolving role of auditors not just to come in after the fact and miss investigation, but to be in lockstep with boards and sometimes with management to evaluate risk and identify issues as early in the process as possible. So I hope that the Auditor General will get involved in similar major projects in that advisory role to Council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. So on the motion, carried. Carried. The next motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure is by Councillor Shirley, seconded by Councillor Harder with respect to private approach on Bel Air Drive. There's a timing issue on suspension. Carried.
Carried.
Councillor Shirley. Councillor Shirley.
Yeah. So this is basically in relation to a construction project that the city is doing these streets, and in doing that they have to reconstruct the driveways of the various people's properties, and by law determined that if they were reconstructed, they would have to be reconstructed to with conformity to the current bylaw and not to the way the driveways were constructed beforehand or in the position that they were in beforehand. So this just allows them to reconstruct the driveways as they exist and have existed for the last number of decades.
Anyone else on the motion? Any other motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure? Okay. Next, notice is a motion for consideration of subsequent meeting avec des motions pour examen en réunion subséquente. Motion by myself, seconded by Councillor Tierney. This is a request from staff. Whereas the City of Ottawa has submitted previous applications for infrastructure funding opportunities from the federal and provincial programs, such as Infrastructure Canada's Investing in Canada Plan, and whereas infrastructure investments have detailed eligibility requirement and constrained project delivery timelines, and whereas these types of applications usually require a council authorization in order to apply, a municipal bylaw or council resolution is required to execute the agreement, whereas the city anticipates that infrastructure funding opportunities may present themselves over the summer, giving the city an opportunity to advance priority projects that may be shovel ready. Therefore, be it resolved, the City Council delegate the authority to the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development with the concurrence of the Chief Financial Officer, City Treasurer, and in consultation with the applicable General Managers to submit an application on behalf of the City of Ottawa for infrastructure funding that may become available between Council meetings of July 21st and September 8th, and seek Council approval to execute the agreement with the provincial and or federal governments if successful. So we'll discuss that at the next meeting. The next motion is Councillor Shantiri.
I was going to suggest, Mr. Mayor, because of time, and can we deal with that notice of motion today? Is that a possibility? Because there's so many small programs here and there we're hearing about. I don't want to miss any opportunity. I'm not sure how you feel about it or staff feel about it at this point.
Yeah, if the will of council is there, it deals with, because we have a meeting on July 21st, but if people are willing to waive the rules on suspension.
Carried.
On the motion as presented.
I just want to ask a small question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure we have covered all our bases. As you know, Mr. Mayor, I'm one of those councillors who submit in the past with your support for some of the flood area, especially the roads in those flood areas right across the city, not necessarily just in my ward. But is staff taking many of those programs? I just want to know, is all these been covered? Can Mr. Willis just give 5 seconds of what has been covered with this motion, just so we can have a better understanding?
Mr. Mayor, staff asked for this motion because in what we believe is a pre-election phase at both levels, senior levels of government, but primarily the federal government, we expect a large number of announcements in the coming weeks that could occur over the summer. And whenever these programs come out, the turnaround times to apply are always very short, and we may not have time to get in front of council to get approval to apply. This allows us to get in front of council it gives us delegated authority to apply, and then if we get awarded it, we'll come back and get verification from council. The programs are all over the place. They're very, unlike the last 2009 stimulus funding, which was big bulk funding. They're all very, very small, incredibly small. And if they're small projects that are incredibly specific, we had an example of one last week where we had to find a ventilation system in a city-owned building. There was only one in the city's asset management pool that actually qualified, so we went ahead and filed on that and notified the ward councillor. Larger program, we put a memo out to council and get ideas. And I encourage all members of council, as we have through all of the infrastructure projects, that if you have ideas of concern or priority to you, please call me. You know, if I know it's on your radar screen, our staff can watch for it if any of the programs come out. And as I said, that small, incredibly specific programs, we'll just go get applications in. If they're larger, we'll put a memo out to council, let you know it's out there, and seek input quickly when they come.
So I do appreciate that, Mr. Willis, and I know your staff, our staff, city staff are tracking so many programs we hear about. But my question to you is, how could we help you? Like, I mean, instead of calling, is there's that form you can tell us those programs is coming or is available if you want to apply? I'm talking about like some road work in a flood area, some community center parking or damage or roof leaking. I'm just trying to understand how could I contribute to that discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, just really quickly, any member of council wants to have that conversation, please reach out to me or Karina Duclos or Jen Nielsen. We're happy to have those conversations with you. Most of the funding is not for repairs and maintenance. It's usually for new build, shovel-ready new build projects that can be turned around within a year or less. But this is we commit. We get input from the various departments as well. So if it's, for example, as a recreation project, you can also talk to Mr. Chenier, and he'll over to us as well. So please, the door is open. If there are things that we're looking for, please let us know.
Thank you.
That's great, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the endorsement, Mr. Mayor, and I hope my colleague will support that motion. It's really important to us. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Kavanaugh, did you dissent? I heard a dissent.
Regarding the this is on the floodplain?
Yeah, no, this is on the staff giving them authority between council meetings in the summer to apply for infrastructure.
No, I didn't dissent.
Okay, all right. So on the motion, carried?
Carried.
Okay, thank you. The next a motion for consideration, and thanks Councillor Tierney, by the way, for seconding that, is a motion by Councillor Dudas, and I believe seconded by Councillor Tierney. Notice a motion on Montreal LRT station. Councillor Dudas, if you'd like to introduce the motion, please.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the future Montreal LRT station is next to a city-owned parcel of land at municipal address 2275 Road, which is located at the northeast corner of the on-ramp off of St. Joseph's Boulevard onto Regional Road 174. Therefore, it be resolved that Council direct planning, infrastructure, and economic development staff and corporate real estate office staff to investigate the potential for a transit-oriented development, including opportunities for affordable housing,
Recording stopped. Recording progress.
As well,
Recording in progress.
In 2 minutes.
You mean we weren't broadcasting that stellar conversation that we all had just had?
No, Councillor.
It's a value add right there.
Start over.
And to members of the public, we're, I believe, back on YouTube and Rogers Cable 22 and 23. We last left off, Councillor Dudas, if you'd like to reintroduce your motion because it froze when you were speaking.
Certainly. I thought it was just me, but no, that's okay. So this is a notice of motion to be brought forward at the July 21st council meeting, whereas the future Montreal Roads LRT station is next to city-owned parcel of land at the municipal address 2275 Montreal Road, which is located at the northeast corner of the on-ramp off of St. Joseph Boulevard onto Regional Road 174. Therefore, be resolved that council direct planning, infrastructure, and economic development staff and CREO staff to investigate the potential for a transit-oriented development, including opportunities for affordable housing or employment at that location, and report back on their findings by Q1 2023, taking into account the need for a bus loop on the site. So currently this land, it was always a field, and it was an empty field. It's now being used as a staging site for construction teams working on Stage 2 LRT in the East End. As part of the contract with Stage 2 LRT, it's going to just revert back to a field once this is done, with the exception of a bus loop that will be integrated. It is the only station along the corridor that is not being investigated currently for potential TOD improvement, and it has opportunities for amenities located with it. It also is, once again,
just a point of clarification, we'll have this whole debate next meeting. So it's just to introduce the motion, and thank you for that. The next notice of motion for a subsequent meeting is Councillor Leeper and Councillor McKenney.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is a motion that would direct City Council to ask the federal government for changes to drug policy in light of the opioid crisis. There are a number of whereases that I'll skip, but therefore be resolved that Ottawa City Council direct Mayor Watson to write on its behalf to the Government of Canada requesting that it declare the overdose crisis a national public health emergency so that it is taken seriously and funded appropriately. Further resolved, the Council requests that the Government of Canada immediately seek input from the people most affected by this crisis and meet with the provinces and territories to develop a comprehensive pan-Canadian overdose action plan, which includes comprehensive supports and full consideration of reforms that other countries have used to significantly reduce drug-related fatalities and stigma, such as legal regulation of illicit drugs to ensure safe supply of pharmaceutical alternatives to toxic street drugs, and decriminalization for personal use.
Okay, thank you. We'll discuss that at the next meeting. Next notice of motion is by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Gower. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am introducing a notice of motion concerning seeking council endorsement of community initiative to seek commemoration of Rockcliffe Park as a historic district of national significance. I'll read the motion into the record. Whereas the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, on behalf of the Village of Rockcliffe Park, has filed an application for the commemoration of Rockcliffe Park as a historic district of national significance with the Historic Site and Monument Board of Canada, the board. whereas an endorsement from the municipality is required as part of this application, and whereas the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District comprises the entire former village of Rockcliffe Park and was designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1997 for its rare and significant approach to estate layout and landscape design, and whereas one of the objectives of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District plan is to conserve and enhance Rockcliffe Park's unique as a planned and designed 19th century community characterized by its curving roads without curbs or sidewalks, large lots and greens and gardens and buildings set within a visually continuous green landscape. And whereas historic districts constitute appropriate subjects for commemoration by the board and are classified as geographically defined areas which create a special sense of time and place through buildings, structures, and open spaces modified by human use and which are united by past events and use and or aesthetically by architecture and plan. And whereas such commemoration does not provide additional regulatory authority on the part of the municipality or that of the federal government in respect of such sites, therefore be it resolved that council endorse the application by the Rockcliffe Parks Residents Association for the commemoration of Rockcliffe Park as a historic district of national significance under the present legislation, being the Historic Sites and Monument Act, RSC 1995 CH4.
Okay, thank you. Next notice of motion is official plan modeling. Councillor Menard, who's your seconder, Councillor? It's not on my sheet.
Councillor Leeper is seconder.
Okay, so go ahead.
Thanks very much. The first one is on new official plan modeling, whereas the new official plan is expected to guide growth in the City of Ottawa for the next 25 years, whereas robust modeling is needed for residents and stakeholders to understand the likely changes and impacts of proposed official plan policies as it relates to meeting growth management goals. And whereas the city has not yet shared this modeling, many communities and residents are inferring or guessing as to whether the OP is likely to reach our intensification objectives. And whereas without this modeling, residents have limited ability to gauge whether the new OP policies will permit or enable zoning that can be absorbed in neighborhoods. And whereas the draft new OP included a minimum density requirement of 80 units per hectare, and PIDE has indicated that they have done the math with respect to the removal of this policy for the new OP, and that it is still possible to meet our growth targets. And whereas the draft new OP also included language that would allow upzoning within neighborhood residential streets of up to 4 stories to meet growth management objectives, and it is critical to understand the likely development potential in new dwelling units for OP policies. And whereas once policy language in the OP is adopted, the city is usually wedded to applications that meet the OP language, regardless of the zoning, so that built form under the OP becomes essentially as of right, which is why rationale supported by modeling that demonstrates likely outcomes is so critical. And whereas in the last year, many residents have been making requests for the city to share its modeling, including public statements to the effect that modeling analysis done by PIDE has been robust and an integral part of the analysis in support of OP policies. And whereas communities were expecting to see modeling when the draft OP was released, and whereas the city needs to share the modeling that is informing new OP policy and should provide a reasonable amount of time to review it before the OP proceeds to planning committee in order to demonstrate to residents and stakeholders that the proposed OP policies are the right ones and critical to building understanding and support for this OP. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ottawa share its modeling of new OP policies publicly as soon as possible within the month of July, so that enough time is afforded to residents to review it and demonstrate a real intent to provide meaningful engagement on the modeling, given the city's current expedited timeline for the official plan.
Right, thank you. And Councillor Menard, you have a second notice of motion?
Yes, thanks very much. Mayor, also seconded by Councillor Leeper. And this one is on the OP costs, if we can get that up there. Thank you. So whereas big cities who consider expanding their urban boundaries also ensure the costs for such expansions are estimated and noted publicly prior to the decision on expansion, and whereas Ottawa is a big city in Canada, and whereas at the July 6, 2021 meeting of FEDCO, the report on budget directions indicated that the City of Ottawa should achieve fiscal discipline and help council mitigate tax increases to an acceptable level. And whereas the staff report on the new official plan growth management strategy presented to council on May 27, 2020, recommended the inclusion of between 1,350 to 1,650 gross hectares of new urban residential and employment land. And whereas the report did not include any estimates on the cost to taxpayers to build and maintain new infrastructure to support development on greenfield parcels over the long term, as compared to augmenting existing infrastructure in the built-up area. And whereas recent analysis on growth patterns in cities across the country show that a centrally focused development pattern is more financially efficient than large expansion scenarios, resulting in a net increase of city revenues of 8% and a decrease in tax pressures on residents. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ottawa provide a public estimate on the costs for urban boundary expansion in respect of new infrastructure creation, operation and maintenance over the time horizon of the new official plan, and that information be presented to the Joint Committee and Council as part of the report back on the final draft of the new official plan. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other notices of motion? Councillor El-Shantiri.
Mr. Mayor, no, I don't have a notice of motion, but when Councillor Leeper introduced his motion, his notice of motion with Councillor McKenney, I put my hand up to ask if Councillor Leeper, I know it's a notice of motion, but if he should share that motion with the Ottawa Public Health.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Councillor Eglai will get a copy of that and share it with OPH.
That exchange has occurred.
All right.
Yes, I just received it after it was introduced to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Fleury.
Okay, I'll try to do it better this time. So, que le règlement énuméré à l'ordre du jour sous le titre Motion portant présentation des règlements, 3 lectures soient lues et adoptées telles que modifiées.
Carried. Confirmation bylaw, règlement de ratification. Councillor Fleury.
Que les règlements suivants soient lus et adoptés, règlement ratifiant les délibérations du Conseil du 7 juillet 2021.
Adopté. Carried. I have 3 written inquiries. First, Councillor Fleury.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Inquiry, so I'll read it here. Over the last year, there's been no doubt an increase in 311 call volumes. To have a better understanding of service being provided to residents via 311 call center, could city staff provide a breakdown of the following data periods from January 1st, 2021 to present, the average number of daily calls, the increase in daily calls compared to previous year, average call wait times for the caller during the week, average call wait time for the caller on weekends, what was the longest wait time period during the week, what was the longest wait time period during the weekend.
Okay, thank you. Next inquiry, the next 2 are about fireworks. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following Canada Day, my office received numerous complaints regarding the setting off of fireworks. A number of these complaints were related to fireworks being set off on school board properties. The complaints related to the time of day that fireworks were used, as well as the unsafe manner they were used, including in close proximity to private homes. Can staff please provide information as to the following? Are there existing city policies or procedures that speak to when and how fireworks can be set off on school board properties? 2, please inform Council what steps were taken by bylaw in advance of Canada Day to advise the various school boards about concerns related to fireworks use on their properties. Further, please advise Council of the response of the various school boards. 3, can staff also set out how they might be able to work with the school boards going forward to coordinate better enforcement around fireworks related issues such as noise, day utilized, and inappropriate or safe or unsafe use? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on fireworks is Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Councillors across the city received a very high volume of complaints in 2021 about fireworks during the July 1st holiday period. Media have reported that from Canada Day until July 5th, bylaw received about 179 complaints compared to 113 last year, according to the City of Ottawa. There were 31 complaints in 2019. Residents have increasingly expressed their discomfort with the effects of backyard fireworks. In light of this, could staff please outline, based on a multi-jurisdictional review, what permit and regulation frameworks are in place that would suggest a potential list of best practices if City Council were to determine such a framework would be appropriate? I realize this is a significant inquiry, but I did swing this by Mr. Chapman in advance of bringing it to committee or to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fleury, adjournment.
sorry, toddling through a lot of screens here, que les délibérations du Conseil du 7 juillet 2021 soient ajournées.
Carried? Thank you. Meeting adjourned, and the media availability will begin at 11:45. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Thank you.